So today is Saturday, May 6th, 2017. This is the 13th anniversary of the passing of Roshi Philip Kapleau, uh, a dear friend, our first teacher, Rose and myself, and one of the forces behind this Zendo. So this morning, the Teisho will go into a bit on Roshi Kapleau briefly. And then I'd like to share with you something that was a favorite of his. I also recommend that if you haven't yet done so, to take a look at the Facebook page posting for Endless Path Zendo. As of yesterday, there's a reposting of the article I was asked to write for Buddha Dharma back in 2004, shortly after Roshi Kapleau's passing, about his life and his death, and also a photo of him that's kind of fun. It's after he broke his arm ice skating. A little bit. Roshi Kapleau, Rose, and myself, over 30 years or so of being together, became very close. Very much family. We traveled together, ate together, went out together. We stayed with him for periods in Mexico, in New Mexico, and Florida. We were his attendants at his 2 Omega Institute weekends when he was teaching there. Roshi often came to our house to soak in our hot tub, and then we'd have vegetarian sushi and watch a movie together. He had recognized fairly early on that my personality did not fit the Rochester Center's Japanese monkish style, and that I didn't particularly benefit from or need its artificial external pressure. In time, his recognition of our differences only strengthened the bond between us. Eventually, I found my way as a committed lay practitioner. As he entered his retirement, we stayed close, even as I moved on to other teachers in a very different atmosphere of practice. That's the other side of our Zendo, is reflected in Robert Aitken Roshi, on Nelson Foster Roshi, and Dane and Henry Roshi. Those first two were founders of the Diamond Sangha, and Dane and Henry Roshi, after being ordained and sanctioned as a teacher by Kapleau Roshi, then worked with Aitken Roshi to become a Diamond Sangha teacher. So our Zendo really reflects both sides of our lineage. I remain deeply grateful to Kapleau Roshi today and every day. He gave his all, and through his friendship and encouragement, he gave me the tools I needed to find my own real life. So today's Teisho will be on Roshi Kapleau's favorite Jataka tale, which is about giving your all. It's titled Give It All You've Got. And it comes very early in the Jataka tradition. I believe it's the second Jataka in the 547 Jatakas of the Pali tradition. So I'm going to read from my own book, The Hungry Tigress, Buddhist Myths, Legends, and Jataka Tales, the completely revised and expanded edition of 1999, published by Yellow Moon Press. Here's how the story could go. Long ago, the Buddha, and remember the Buddha was always the narrator. He was telling a story. In this case, the Jataka was told because a young monk had reached a point of complete frustration in their practice. They just didn't see how they could go on. And the Buddha says, well, this is not the first time that this has happened. And he tells this Jataka. So long ago, the Buddha was a merchant and traveler. He gathered his goods in one part of India, traded what he had brought with him, then sold his new merchandise elsewhere. In this way, he gained much experience, survived hardships, learned about the differing ways of peoples, and essentially became experienced in the sense of wise and gathered some wealth. When he was already gray-bearded, distinguished time in life, he was bringing a caravan of goods across a sandy desert. He had 100 ox-drawn carts filled with cloth, spices, and grain. Many men were in his employ at that time, and he hired in addition a desert pilot to guide them through the wasteland. Now, a desert pilot is a man who knows the land and the stars. Like a pilot at sea, he navigates by starlight, and so can lead a caravan across the most featureless desert terrain. Of course, they must travel by night. That's when the stars are out. And it's also because the day is too hot to travel across the desert. So, nighttime, uh, which is why a desert pilot is crucial. Because of the terrible heat, the caravan rested during the day under awnings, men and oxen both. Then, after the sun went down, they would hitch up the oxen and set off under the stars. In this way, they traveled safely 6 days across the sands. They had water and wood and food enough for another day or so, but by now men and oxen were quite tired. That night, the pilot seated in the lead wagon announced that by morning they would be beyond the desert. Wood, water, food, all again would be plentiful. So they unloaded the remaining jars, the sacks of rice, and the wood they carried for building cooking fires, and with their loads considerably lightened, set off on the final trek. So they left their water, their rice, their wood, because they were almost through the desert after as many days, and they were tired. They didn't want to carry all that stuff. The pilot had been up on constant watch for 6 nights. The great heat, glaring light, had made sleep even during the day difficult. Now, as they neared their destination, he dozed, and the wagons rolled on, the oxen marching steadily through the darkness. The pilot just couldn't keep his eyes open. All those nights of being very alert, and the days where he really, because of the heat and light, hardly rested. It overcame him. The stars glittered clearly overhead. Everyone was very happy. The end was in sight. The men were laughing and joking. Now, just before dawn, the pilot awoke with a start. He glanced at the stars and cried out in alarm. Rather than going straight and true on their course, they had been veering in a great half circle through the night. They were no nearer the desert's ending than they had been at the sun's going down. Men and oxen were already terribly thirsty. In an hour, the sun would rise like a great ball of fire. The desert would become hot as a blast furnace. They would be consumed by thirst, and their water had all been left behind. "Halt!" cried the pilot. "Stop the wagons! Stop!" The cloth shelter was erected, and all huddled beneath its protection from the searing rays of the desert sun. Now, the Bodhisattva, then the merchant leader of the caravan, was no newcomer to danger. He stepped out from the shade of the shelter and began to walk along the dunes. He spied what he'd been searching for, a few tufts of grass rising from the sand. "Bring shovels," he called, "quickly." His men hurried forward, shovels and picks in hand. "Dig," he said, "where this grass grows. Dig. Our lives depend on it." Down they dug into the sands, deeper and deeper. The exertion in that heat was terrible. Men gasped and fainted. Many times they thought to just give up and wait for death. But the merchant stood firmly by them. "Dig," he said, "I know it is hard, but where grass grows, there is water. Trust me. Do your best." So on they dug. At last they had a narrow well pit extending some 12 or 15 feet straight down. At the bottom, the sand was cool and carried moisture, so parched and exhausted as they were, they had hope and took turns going down to the well bottom and digging on with a will. But their efforts were doomed to fail. After another foot or two of digging, they hit a great stone blocking their way. There was no way to dig around it. The narrow shaft, already sliding with sand, would collapse if the base were widened further. In despair, they all lay exposed on the hot sands and wept. "Don't give up," said the grizzled merchant, the Bodhisattva. "Tie a rope around me and lower me down into the well." As they lowered him down, loose shifting sand slid and hissed ominously down around him. He knelt on the stone and put his ear to it. He could hear, like a distant hum, the movement of water beneath the stone. "Up," he called, "draw me up." The tunnel was treacherous. With every pull, he had to keep from brushing the well's sides and causing the whole shaft to collapse in on him. He came out covered with sand, grim but smiling. "There's water just below the stone," he said. "Get a sledgehammer and bring me the strongest, most well-rested man among you." The sledgehammer was brought, and a large-framed, big-boned youth was brought as well. "Son," the merchant said, "it's up to you. The stone at the well's bottom must be broken. The water is flowing below that stone. Rouse your confidence. You are the strongest. Our lives depend on your determination. Take this hammer and break that stone." The youth was lowered down into the hole and landed upon the stone. There was hardly room for him to swing the hammer, but he lifted it up and struck the stone a great blow. It didn't budge. He tried again and again. It was nerve-wracking work. The water was below. He could feel the whole stone humming with the force of its flow. But one careless swing and the whole shaft of the tunnel might cave in on him. He'd be buried. They'd never get him out. He wiped his brow again, carefully lifted up the hammer, and again brought it down with a great jarring blow. Again he swung, and again, but the stone would not break. He could not go on. The constant threat of the tunnel's collapse, his thirst and weakness, the solidity of that unyielding stone, the hissing of the sand sliding down, all conspired to sap his deepest reserves of strength. "Pull me up," he cried. "Get me out. It's hopeless." The merchant, the bodhisattva, the Buddha in a past life, stuck his head into the dry well shaft. "It's difficult," he said, "but not hopeless. You can do it. The stone will break. Don't give up. If there was ever a time to exert your strength to the limit, this is it. Give it one more shot, and give it all you've got." Heartened, the youth lifted up the hammer one more time and swung it with his whole heart and strength. The rock cracked, split, and a geyser of cool water shot up. Quickly they hoisted him out of the well as the water shot up, bubbling and dancing from the hole. The merchant's fortitude and the youth's strength had saved them. After filling their vessels and drinking their fill, they tended to the oxen and made their way safely out of the desert. In that desert, the well bubbles still. Even today, travelers in the wasteland praise the men who left this bounty for them. So that's the Jataka. Now, let's take a look at Roshi Kapleau's relationship to this Jataka. You see, years ago, when I was working on this final edition of The Hungry Tigress, I asked a number of Buddhist teachers, various Buddhist storytellers as well. One second, excuse me. To tell me what their favorite Jataka was. So that was Aitken Roshi, Kapleau Roshi, Lama, what was his name, Rinpoche, Kongtrul Rinpoche, some other noted Buddhist figures. And they each said what their favorite Jataka was. It became a section in the back of this book called Liking Jatakas. So I will read you Roshi Kapleau's Jataka choice. He answered by saying, "There are many Jataka tales that move me deeply. However, for personal reasons, my own life experience and Zen training, the Jataka which I've seen titled, 'Give It All You've Got,' strikes the deepest chord. In that tale, a caravan leader strengthens the courage of a young man who is down at the bottom of a dry well digging for water. If he fails, they will all die. The rock at the bottom of the well must be broken. But so far it has resisted all efforts. It's a claustrophobic moment. The sand is trickling down, the well shaft threatening to collapse. The youth feels he cannot go on. The caravan leader reassures him that the water is there. Be calm and steady, he says. Give it one more shot and give it all you've got. The youth rouses his energy, tries again, and this time breaks through to the life-saving water. Though simple in plot, direct and unadorned, the story has powerful implications that determination and persistence are the two indispensable ingredients for success in any endeavor. For me, that relates, this is Roshi Kapleau speaking, for me that relates directly to Zen training. My Zen teacher, Harada Roshi, added another element, conviction. When a Zen aspirant is convinced that he or she can awaken to his or her true self, he would say that conviction will generate strong determination, and strong determination results in a persistent all-out effort. Given this mind state, the aspirant can no more miss becoming enlightened than he or she can miss the ground with the stamp of the foot. The story, Roshi Kapleau went on, reinforces this as well as pointing to the indispensable aid that spiritual friends, one's teacher and Sangha, can offer. In my own training in Japan, I often felt very much like that youth in the Jataka tale. When at last my breakthrough was confirmed, I remembered the words on a postcard which my friend Tongan Roshi had once sent me. Sometimes, even in the driest hole, one can find water. It was the spur I needed, and my gratitude to him is boundless. In this Jataka, I found that such experiences have been part of the Buddhist tradition from the beginningless beginning, and my gratitude arises once more. So, to go on, Sinyanograph Roshi sent me this in relation to this Jataka when I shared it with her at our Jataka session, I think this last fall. It's a quote from Marshal Ferdinand Foch, however it's pronounced, world French commander, World War I. My center is giving way. My right is in retreat. Situation excellent, I shall attack. So, in the Tigress Jataka, the Bodhisattva gives his all. Remember that Jataka. He offers his own body to a starving tigress and her cubs. No holding back. He does so here too, but in a completely different way. As part of his total giving, the Bodhisattva wastes no time in recriminations or in finger-pointing. He stays alert, starts dealing with their difficulty. He searches, finds tiny signs of life, and determines what can and should be done. By force of personality, experience, and leadership, he gets everyone to pitch in. He doesn't delegate. He himself goes down into the dangerous well, and when the one whose physical strength they depend on falters, he gives encouraging words, the very words needed to bring about a final self-transcending effort. The Bodhisattva isn't Superman. He observes, leads, and encourages. His attention, confidence, faith, experience, and clarity make the difference. He gives us a model of mature leadership and shows us how to deal with errors, for he, too, makes mistakes. The Jataka as a metaphor also reminds us to not foolishly toss away precious resources of practice, thinking my practice is complete or now I've got it. We need to keep going until we've really crossed the desert of samsara. Samsara, a Sanskrit word, literally means wandering. It is the world as created and experienced by our wandering, unsettled minds and senses. As to how to cross, Robert Aiken Roshi's advice was not enough yet, not yet enough. That is, keep going. There's no need to get frantic or overwrought. Rather, wherever we are, don't stop and get complacent. Don't start drifting and going through the motions. Remain settled, dedicated, committed, ardent. Allow each breath, each koan to be fresh and new. But if we fail, if we falter, if we lose our grip and start wandering, then as the Jataka shows, there's No point in wallowing in self-recrimination. That just digs a deeper hole. We pick ourselves up and do what needs to be done to get back on track. Fully re-engaged with this moment of life practice, swinging that old practice hammer. We take a breath. We splash cold water on our face and neck. We sit before Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. We remember our vows and deepest purpose. We remember, too, the reality of impermanence. We're each only here for a very short time. In this Jataka, the Buddha himself makes a serious mistake. As caravan leader responsible for others, he should never have followed the pilot's careless advice. To toss away their precious wood and water in order to travel with a lighter load, taking it easy, might have sounded good, but as it turned out, it wasn't so wise. We assume that this is not a mistake he's likely to make again. While these are Dharma points, the central point is clearly the matter of giving all you've got. What does it mean to give all you've got? How does it relate to not just times of danger or intensity, but our daily life? People caught in catastrophes or battles have done remarkable self-transcending things. Without thought or leaping beyond thought, they give all to save and protect others. This is the stuff of heroism, of literature and legend, the realm of noble action. Animals, too, do selfless things in jatakas and in life. Dogs, cats, porpoises, elephants, rats have all been shown to step beyond self-centeredness and act for the benefit of others. Daigyu, the great fool known as Ryokan, and others in our lineage, both men and women, starting with the Buddha himself, place their sitting mats down here. People who indulge in extreme sports can know this territory. When we put our life on an edge, we're only full attention, and all our skill can keep us this side of injury or death. We know a kind of exhilaration. We feel alive. Why? We've given our all. There's no time left for habitual ideas of me, myself, to slip in and separate us from what's around us. There's no one there to have self-centered thoughts. Any self-centered thought is already too late, out of touch with the flow. Make that waterfall or cataract of reality. In intense situations that demand full attention, we have no time for such trivia. Then the ancient habit of clinging to life is how we lose life. Zen Master Ikkyu wrote to a man seeking words of wisdom, attention, attention, attention. We've all had moments and glimpses long before formal practice ever began. I've mentioned this before, but I'll repeat it. I was on my high school fencing team. One of my best matches was against a much stronger opponent. Somehow, as I focused on guard, foil, and hand, my normal shyness and self-concern fell away. When the signal was given, I leapt forward and 1, 2, 3, made 3 valid touches. Almost before I knew it, the match was over and I'd won. How? I had no idea. Time and space fell away. With no thoughts about myself left, I was simply able to give all. That experience raised a question for me. How might I live like that? This odd moment was part of the precondition for how I came to Zen, or for how Zen was able to find me. I also remember riding my motorcycle on the 390 a few hours south of Rochester when the sky turned black. Rain and hail began pouring down so hard I couldn't see 10 feet in front of me. Water came up over my tires' rims. Cars were pulling onto the shoulder because drivers couldn't see the road ahead. Then came lightning. On the motorcycle, I couldn't pull over and stop. A car might not see me and plow right into me. My brakes were soaked and I might slide and die or hydroplane. And even if I did manage to stop, I'd be sitting on a metal motorcycle, exposed to lightning. I began screaming, "Kanon, kanon, kanon," in my helmet. A single self-centered thought, and I could lose it. I kept screaming until ahead I could make out the next exit ramp. I took it and miraculously at its bottom found a gas station where I could drink hot chocolate, get dry, and wait out the storm. But for that time of terror, in that wholehearted calling, me, myself, and precious I was gone. In that calling, I was whole. Giving all, I'd lost what I'd never needed and found what I'd forgotten I'd lost. Of course, purposefully seeking extreme experiences in order to forget ourselves and experience what, for lack of a better word, we call oneness, though actually manyness might be equally or perhaps even more accurate, is not recommended. We don't go looking for starving tigers or lost caravans or terrible storms to go riding motorcycles. Still, we understand the impulse. Without ongoing Zen practice, extreme moments force us to pay such good attention that self-centeredness falls away, and we experience a touch of no self or non-duality. I once spoke with an ex-motorcycle racer who, learning that I was a writer, said, "It's not about the motorcycle. It's a spiritual thing." I knew what he meant. That sense of being so present that there is just sky, road, river, trees, all our usual self-involvement totally gone. Though he clearly experienced that too while riding, he had no daily practice. All he could do was get back on the bike and ride again. Off a motorcycle, he had only memories. He couldn't live it. It had no functioning in his life. But with regular, ongoing Zen practice, it need not be so extreme and can be more total. We can get to the heart of it. We can give all what we cling to most dearly and dangerously. This burdensome sense of an isolated, permanent, separated self can be seen through. It's not a physical effort. And it doesn't require that we get rid of or suppress anything. We don't need the pressure of terrifying or dangerous circumstance. We can give all we've got to this breath, this count, this lifting of the spoon, this stretching out of our legs, this koan, this striking the bell. Really give our all to this never to be again moment of practice, of life. We can let it all go and be that much more awake. Giving all means just this. No one's standing back, commenting, reflecting. Those old habits of mind are gone. When all is given, all is received. With self-centeredness gone, we are intimate with sunlight on leaves. A barking dog, a smiling face, an angry face, the dust on the road. While we don't live on the peaks of overwhelming moments, they can, through ongoing practice, inform all we think, feel, and do in the ordinary challenges and events of our day. Tung-shan's beautiful verse in his 5 ranks or modes goes like this: not falling into being or non-being. Who can be in accord with this? Everyone longs to leave the eternal flux, not just to live in harmony, but to return and sit by the charcoal fire. To return and sit by the charcoal fire is to be completely natural, sitting by our own hearth on all the trials, difficulties, and events of our life. Through days of sesshin, years of practice, we can drop a habitual, unconscious focus on the idea of a separated self-conscious self and be fully what we do. Be eating, be getting tired and sleeping, be doing zazen. Giving it all we've got means nothing left over. Giving wholeheartedly to this moment, just as it is, the water of life is not far away. And yet, There remains the ongoing work of practice, but it's no longer a burden. It's simply the work we were born for, to breathe, to be present, to inquire deeply. Giving all we've got is not different than each day's sunrise, a stream flowing, stars shining, snow melting, grass growing, the call of a robin. Giving all, we find all beings are doing the same and have been all along. With this realization, we rejoin our ancient community and find ourselves at peace and at home. How? Stay steady. Even as you falter, come back to this breath. Come back to the practice, the koan, and give it all you've got. Hegiganoku, case number 17. A monk once asked Xianglin, Kyorin in Japanese, what is the meaning of the patriarchs coming from the West? Xianglin said, sitting long and getting tired. The monk, in asking why Bodhidharma, the first patriarch of Zen, made the then difficult journey from southern India to China, was asking, what is the highest teaching of the Buddha Dharma? Why did that old man make such a difficult journey? There had to be a good reason. What is it? Xianglin answers, sitting long, getting tired. He doesn't mean that Zen is about sitting still for a long time. You could sit on a mat forever and still not get it. So how does this show it? How will you show this highest meaning in your own life? Jatakas like koans can point the way, but like koans, they are not simply about what happened at one time to someone we might hope to emulate. You don't have to leap from a cliff, though it can seem like that. You don't have to go down into a dangerous well, though at times it can feel like that. Xianglin said, sitting long, getting tired. Last week we explored how Zhao Chu, in answering this same question, said, the oak tree in the front garden. What do you give when you give all you've got? And what happens when you do? Going back to where we began with Philip Kapleau Roshi, Yamada-san, later Yamada Roshi, wrote to his teacher, Nakagawa Soen Roshi, right after his deep enlightenment, which began to open, not while he was in the Zendo, but while he was on a train with his wife reading a Zen book. He wrote these words as part of his letter to Nakagawa Soen Roshi. That American, he means Philip Kapleau, that American was asking us whether it is possible for him to attain enlightenment in 1 week of sesshin. Tell him this for me. Don't say days, weeks, years, or even lifetimes. Don't say millions or billions of kalpas. Tell him to vow to attain enlightenment, though it take the infinite, the boundless, the incalculable future.